I present you a very brief snapshot of, in the urban thing, the numbers are very important. So I very quickly give you the numbers. Then I give you just an illustration of some of the key problems. And then I quickly move to what is the vision. See, I firmly believe that it's important to ask good questions, but it's also to try and give the answers. Because I'm sick of hearing this for years and decades together that we don't have the answers. Because if that's the point, then we are failing. And that is why actually the way capitalism or the way some of the problems, I don't consider capitalism totally evil incidentally, but the way some of the problems in the world are expanding, because we keep saying that, इसे समझना है, इसे पढ़ना है, and we don't have the answers. So it's better that we try to think of some answers, work towards a consensus and proceed in that. So that's the perspective. And the last part is then specific strategies to achieve that vision. What we can do to work towards that vision. So there are more details in the paper. This will be quite short. Okay, this is a snapshot. Main point I want to say is that if you see the trend of rural and urban, 1901, 89.2% rural population. Projection for 2050, so over a 150-year period, from almost 90%, it will come down to 48%. I mean, assuming the projections are right. In fact, there's one of the papers on India's urban future in 2050, which I asked some people at Pondicherry, some French scholars to do 2 years ago. It's there in one of the issues of futures I edited. That predicts, that gives a projection of 55% of urban population for 2050. So it's somewhere between 51 and 55%. So we like it or not, this is the trend, and it's quite a firm trend, as you can see, from between 1901 and 2050. Okay, globally, 30% urban population in 1950, projection for 2050, 66%. 2/3 of the global population will be urban. In India, we are currently at 410 million, about 30% of the population, and in 2050, it's going to be 814 million in terms of absolute numbers. So, just a little over half the total population, or more than half if the 55% projection is taken. Then in terms of the number of cities and towns, there are about 7,900 of these, with a breakup of these statutory towns, as they are classified, and the census towns. The census towns are the ones with the municipality, etc. The statutory towns are the ones with this triple three criteria: over 5,000 population, density over 400 per square kilometer, and at least 75% male workers not in agriculture. So we have these 7,935, and this is in 2011. Those are the numbers, that's all. Now, this is from the McKinsey report in 2010 on India's urbanization, and as you can see in terms of these figures, this is the first. The green one is the position in India, the second one is the general standard adopted, and third one is the best in the class. So if you see now I've come to the one aspect of the problems. Slum population, I'll begin with the last one. Slum population is, again, figures vary from 20 to 20 or 18 to 24%. Solid waste collected in India is collected as percentage of that generated is 72%. Sewage treatment is 30%, parks and open spaces 2.7%, public transportation 30%, and water supply is 105 liters per capita against the standard of 150. So, and of course we are not, repeatedly there will be issues of distribution, and of course the ones who are getting more are getting much more, so this hides a lot of other problems that the ones in the slums and the poor are getting much less. Okay, this is the other part of and it also links to some of the understanding of the problem and the solutions that I'm going to be suggesting. Just quickly, that in terms of the cost recovery of services in cities, this is just an example from some of the cities, bigger cities and smaller cities. But you'll see the last column, the average cost recovery ranges between 8% and 40% in different cities and towns. So, in terms of providing services, the point is that where will the self-sufficiency come from? Okay, so in terms of the governance of our cities, I won't even focus on this. That main problem is that this 74th amendment was done only in 92. That's also interesting. It was done only as late as 1992, and it's not being followed in practice. anywhere. So I won't touch on the other points. Cities are financially very weak, and this is an interesting, if you just see the last point, if one considers all municipal revenues, including property tax, India's municipal revenues to GDP ratio is less than 1%. These figures are for 2007-8, more or less continuously the same. As compared to 6% for South Africa, 7.4% for Brazil. And there's some interesting table on the property tax revenues itself. These are figures, and let's look at the last one. 2000, in the OECD countries, the total percentage property tax revenue figures, the parenthesis is the percentage of property tax in total revenues of municipal bodies, and the overall figure is the total ratio of percentage of property tax in GDP, just the property tax. So it's only about the property tax. The previous figure was this one was for the overall municipal revenues. This is only property tax. And why I'm saying is that this is one of the important things that really needs to be done in India too. Okay, this is come to the vision. So the city should be in harmony with the hinterland, low ecological footprint as far as possible, high use of renewable energy, managing demand, which is a big thing, high energy efficiency, which is happening a lot in India today, especially in industry, recycling of wastewater, solid waste segregation at source, then it can be managed better. Provide decent housing for all, clean drinking water, sanitation, and we need, the aesthetics of it is very important. I think also beautiful open public spaces, public art and sports facilities, which are substantially missing in Indian cities. Then empower local governing bodies with power to levy taxes, encourage citizen participation, to take care of the problem that we have of low property taxes, low municipal revenues. And there one of the things which repeatedly comes up is in terms of user fees, that services should be provided free to the poor. Yes, I fully agree with that. So there should be cross subsidy for that purpose. So then the size of the cities should be moderate with good public transport, cycling tracks. Let's say if it's a town with a size of 10 to 20 kilometers dia, then cycling and all is it's much better to manage it in terms of transport and other factors. The second part is we need a very good planning for disasters and for climate change. So very good risk assessment. Here in India, even Delhi, you have buildings which don't have fire clearances, don't have not been built with keeping earthquake zoning into account and so on. Conservation of heritage and buildings, and this point about dispersed urbanization, what was mentioned by Lango in the previous session. We have a vision that, let's say, for about the 600 districts which are going to grow to about 700 in future. So about 7,000 towns of about 1 lakh each, which can act as hubs for skills, services, employment, very similar to the 2 lakh sustainable economic zone that you mentioned. So in the populated areas, for the hinterland, for the rural areas, it should serve as a hub for the people in the 20 to 40 kilometer radius. And then management of rivers and water bodies for various purposes, conservation as well as transport as well as flood control. So that's the vision. So I think in the last 2 slides, strategies for the vision. So one is, of course, and this is emphasized, there's almost a consensus building towards this now. This is also the point I want to make. It's not that only some fringe people or some academics or some critics are saying this. More and more scholars everywhere, including, let's say, those associated with things like World Bank and so on, are now talking about having small and medium towns and how they can help. It can be a very important strategy. Now, but to have small and medium towns, you need innovative mechanisms of financing and building the towns. And land pooling and readjustment is a very powerful strategy to do that. So maybe later, I don't want to talk now because the time is limited, but we can talk after about what this means. And this is a very, very good strategy, and some state, Gujarat, has really made use of it for a lot of city development purposes. Public regulatory authorities at multiple levels. Again, this is something that my colleague and I suggested in a book in 2006, that from the panchayat level upwards, the only way to manage land and water and natural resources in an integrated way and in a scientific way is for certain norms to be laid down, and then having public regulatory bodies from panchayat level upwards to the state level who can regulate the use of land and water for various purposes. because there is no such thing that happens as of now. And resilience for climate change and disasters, a lot of innovation. Some examples were given by Sujit. A lot of good examples, globally a lot of them are available, but innovation is missing, so that is unfortunate. I won't go into this. Finally, it's a question of it's more a question of politics. It's a question of taking everybody along, and I don't want to get into the trap of smart and non-smart cities or urban and rural. I think it has to be a vision. And in terms of how smart cities are defined, actually every city it's just use of modern cities for running things better in the city. But the question is, we first want proper water, proper sanitation, the other things, and then cities can be smart. Yes, there's no problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Rakesh. But I know we were asked to be idealistic, but I think you're far too idealistic. I'm being very polite. I think that it's really important for us to disaggregate who lives in our cities. It's not enough to just say this is the number, this is the projection that's going up. Okay, we're going to be 50-55%. You have to look at who is living in the city and in what conditions they're living. Slum dwellers, homeless, who was referring to earlier, so-called illegal labor, the beggars. Let me give you one more figure on slum dwellers. In 2011, Delhi, Mumbai and Kolkata had 17% of the world's slum population. Okay, the project 17% of the entire world. No, 17. In 2031, the projections show that 41% of our country's population will be living in slums. And I would very much dispute the McKinsey figure, right? So if that's the situation, and the current solutions that are being proposed globally, including by some of the institutions you seem to like the World Bank and the UN Habitat, is that we want cities without slums. Essentially meaning we want to evict them. Okay, no, I should...
Whether I like World Bank or not should really be outside the framework of your question.
No, but I'm saying you said you would support some of them.
I'm not allergic to them. That's
okay. But okay, I take that back. But so the question really is not so much the vision that as you presented it, but I think we need to really look at the obstacles that are in the way of achieving that vision, and how do we overcome that? That's the so I think a perspective that really needs to come into your paper, if I can suggest, is you need a much stronger rights and deprivation perspective. The level of dispossession and so on. So it needs a complete restructuring, I think, and a different kind of immersion in the reality that we are facing in the cities today. Thanks.
The last time you said that the obstacle is politics, right? It's not science. I mean, I agree with that, but it might be useful to split that up a little bit, because in common parlance, people use the word politics in a very loose way and sort of say, well, and we see that kind of politics also at play in city governments and gram panchayats, where it's not really political economy, but it's politics in a very different, very localized, it could be caste politics or other kinds of interests that are at play. But the political economy question, I think, is a separate or a different strand in that you might want to elaborate. We see it in various cities where capital, large corporate entities want that kind of development that you're talking about, but on their terms, which means access to certain kinds of land for certain kinds of production spaces, where their taxation, however, will not be in the hands of the city. The city is not allowed to tax them, but they want all the amenities and the facilities and the expressways, elevated expressways and all that. And I think that part of the politics is something one needs to really unpack a little bit more in terms of trying to get there.
The figure about 25% probably is an average figure, but as far as my study goes, cities like Pune have slum population of about 42%, that's the latest census. Mumbai has 55%. So there's a problem about how 25% or this is arrived at, because it's really high. The other thing is, when we're talking about slum amelioration, there are very, very controversial schemes such as SRA, sites and services, which the slum dwellers themselves, I don't like to use the word slums, we call them urban settlements as a better word. Urban settlement dwellers have strongly opposed, despite the municipal corporation affiliated organizations talking about it as a win-win situation. Main reason being that in the urban settlements there is a very, very strong informal economy of services as well as, you know, other kinds of things. And so when you're talking about high-rise buildings in the competition of spaces, it's a real issue that 55% people are either going to go Trilok Puri kinds of things in Delhi as it happened, or they're going into high rises, which is not acceptable to the urban settlements who are contributing in a huge way to the urban economy. I think when we're talking about a future vision, we need to talk about the perspectives of these 40, 50, we can debate on the figures, but there are substantial section of the population and what are we seeing. And then you mentioned something about this whole hubs. I mean, today it's everything is becoming a hub, IT hub, this hub and that hub. And then, of course, decentralization of cities through MIDC and all these things seem to be part of it. But across the country, when we are talking about the taxation base of urban local self-government bodies, it's really a pittance. The taxation base is low, it's dependent on government grants. This whole smart city thing is also very much centrally, coming from Delhi, and there's a big competition on getting...
From Delhi, sir, coming from McKinsey.
Okay, yes, okay, yes, going further. But then it's all a huge status competition on who gets this smart city tag and who is smart city going to benefit. So I think we need to keep all these things when we are talking about the future perspective on urbanization. I don't know how we can take back urbanization. Yes, 50, 60, 70% is going to be urbanization in the years to come. But what kind of urban vision from the perspective of the urban settlements?
I'm a little worried, Rakesh, about urbanization scenarios which do not talk about things like food, health, and education. I think we really need to embed that within the future of urbanization. And if we don't do that, we miss the boat right now. And that's a crucial thing, especially in terms of whether it's slums or urban settlements or the future of our children. But my question is about how do you see us, I mean, France, for instance, the example that I want to use is France, about the size of Karnataka, has 1,600 municipalities. Yeah? In India, I mean, how many do we have? I mean, how do we get more municipal or local self-governance in place, and then talk about the question of local taxation and the control, fiscal decentralization as a prime mover to enable sustainable urbanization? And that fiscal decentralization has to come from a different kind of science too. So I don't quite agree with the politics and not science, because science also has to be decentralized and located within urban and rural communities that use and produce the knowledge that is combined, curiosity with pragmatism. So we need a different kind of science too, if we are talking about sustainable urbanization as equitable and sustainable urbanization.
Extent of urbanization, so the figure that you gave out, 31%, that's the census figure, but there is a suggestion that India may already be 50% urbanized if you consider that the urbanization that has happened outside municipal boundaries, which does not get counted. So I just wanted to, and that figure is much disputed, this comes from World Bank study, I just wanted your response to this politics of numbers around the extent of urbanization that's happening. And the second one, this optimum size and dispersed urban centers, this is an old debate. It was 60s and 70s saw very powerful articulation of this debate. And the concern is the moment you talk optimum size, the question is who is then going to be prevented from coming in, has to be asked. And we know more or less from the indications that are there of the kinds of people who that cities or the people who run these cities don't want. And this was precisely the argument that Ashok Mitra and many others made in the 70s. The talk about optimum size is usually at the expense of the urban poor. And so we have to re-ask that question in terms of sustainability, etc. What do you mean by optimum size?
Taking on to what Nidun said, the kind of people who come into cities, in terms of the bulk of people, we have, fairly recent estimate about maybe 5-6 years ago by the National Commission on Farmers, saying that 40% of the people in agriculture would like to leave agriculture. So terrible is the kind of economic situation there, and this government policies are not helping, combined with forced displacement. So you have a situation of not land urbanization, but a mass-scale distress migration into cities just because livelihoods have been made unviable in the countryside. And there are two fundamental things which need to be considered in terms of any vision of urbanization which is sustainable. Compared to the cities and the urban area, you have at least two major breaks. That the fertility cycle is broken. What came from the soil is not going back to the soil, and the hydrological cycle is broken. What rain falls from the skies has to be absorbed close to where it falls. And that part you have also the external energy dependence. So you have high externalities of urbanization, which really don't make it viable. You talk about minimizing the ecological footprint, but it is fundamentally unsustainable. So we really have to think of de-urbanizing, and whatever urbanization which is going to happen, unless you heal the fertility cycle and the water cycle and the energy generation, it's fundamentally parasitical. So it's just an interjection on this point.
I'm not so sure, Bharat, that it works like that. I wanted to say, Rakesh, that I think you're making a very important point when you show that it's no longer an urban versus rural. There is going to be so many gradations. And I think that is true what he said, that the emphasis now, when people use the term urban, even in a lot of this international global discourse, they no longer mean metropolis. So please let us not confuse the two things. And there may be a case, I don't know it, but I've seen enough to give me the glimmer of a doubt that there may be a case that you cannot actually save the environment unless you aggregate populations to some extent. Now, how that aggregation is by choice and by attraction rather than push and distress, that is a key factor, and I don't know if you in your paper are required to take up that into account, because that I think is the critical issue, that whatever aggregations happen, will they be because of distress and danda, literally, or will they be because there is something more productive and more fruitful to do in that local urban beam, where the MKSS is based, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan is an urban center, but it needs a life. It is so badly maintained, but that's an urban center. So that's one point. And the last issue was, I just wondered if you have scope to look at the successful examples of how a slum is turned into a built-up community. Where I live in Bombay, I visited many of these homes because I know people who live there. They lived in a 10 by 10 unit, which was a kacha hutment, and they have moved into 3 times greater space in a pakka building which they enjoy living in, because the builder, and many builders have done this with good effect, they have an incentive. They create the high-rise tower, and the original residents get their sort of a modern version of the chawl, and where it works very well. So I just want to put that on the record, that it's not all darkness and despair. I know majority may be, but there are very good examples that we need to push to see that policies promote that model.
It is taken as a fait accompli that urbanization and majority population of the earth is going to be in urban centers. And that should be questioned. It is not questioned at all. Secondly, I think that the major population in the cities, maybe it is small cities or metropolis, it is because of the distress migration from the rural areas. So we have gone through the experience that whenever there is land redistribution in some areas, there is a drought eradication in some areas, people have moved away from the metropolis to the rural areas. So dispersed, decentralized, renewable-based industrialization, and combine that with equitable water distribution and different kind of organic farming positions might bring a different scenario. So at least distressed population, why it should remain in the urban centers? That should be considered.
Even this idea of land pooling, I think a aspect that's tucked into it is deeper inquiry into the notion of property rights, especially if we're looking at the model that was spoken about in terms of slum dwellers getting property rights through adverse possession. What does that sort of dynamic look like? And if that particular model can pave the way for a new urban future.
I just want to bring two factoids to notice. One is study by the Planning Commission that shows that when rural labor is displaced and brought to urban areas, productivity increases 4 times, which is the drive behind urbanization. That is why the McKinsey report focuses on it, because productivity will go up 4 times, and it further says that the international norm is 7 times. So we are still backward in that respect.
Regardless of industry, which industry?
Regardless of industry, it's through informalization that this is happening. Which means that exploitation actually goes up 4 times. That is the one thing. The second thing is now studies are being done on carbon footprints, and I think we should all take that into notice. Which is carbon footprints in urban areas are showing that the moment you exceed 8,000 rupees per month, you are exceeding the threshold. So what is going to be the urban footprint needs to be taken into consideration when we talk about water, electricity, power, transport, etc. That 8,000 rupees is that limit.
I wish the slide wasn't there because I've been disturbed by this slide. It's politics and not science that hinders the pursuit of urban sustainability. See, it is really lack of politics, lack of contestation that we saw in the way the urbanization took place 80s and 90s. In fact, if contestation had taken place, we wouldn't have had such a dismal situation. And as far as science is concerned, knowledge production is concerned with regard to urban sustainability, I think it's in pittance. I don't know, it's in a very, hardly there is any knowledge production devoted, whether it's in social sciences or sciences. The way the professions have conducted themselves, whether it is in architecture, whether it's town planning, whether it is dealing with water or environment, I think there's much to be corrected, alternatives need to be produced, and I think the way knowledge production has been dealt in your essay at the moment maybe needs to be rethought.
So, see, I'll comments from Milun and Sharat about the political economy perspective. See, this is what I want to say, or even about this thing that knowledge evasion is not there. See, I would request earnestly everybody who is on this task of trying to vision and create an alternative future to pick on the spirit and not the words. Because I feel that what's happening here in some of the things is, I have not, for reasons of space, for reasons of time, maybe not elaborated so much in the political economy perspective, but even if one elaborates on the political economy perspective and talks about the rights perspective, one is still going to have a broad vision which I have still presented. This is the point I want to make. Sorry. So, and if I am presenting the vision presented here, I do not think per se the vision itself implies the denial of any rights or even implies the non-acknowledgement of political economy. It may not have been made explicit, which is and to that extent I appreciate that point, and I have in fact in the comments with the editors, I mentioned this, that this needs to be also studied or maybe looked at from that perspective, which means that you are then putting in another theoretical perspective to look at the whole thing. So this is one thing which I want to say. Now, about some of the other specific questions, see, slums, yes, that is an average. So whatever you said about, I go along with it, but that is an average. So Pune may be more, Bombay may be more, Delhi may be more, but the average data and figures that we have is that may be wrong. I am open to, if there's a better study, yes, but that's the data I have that one has to work with. Rajeshwari's point, see, if you see actually in the vision, you said if one is not taking into account food, health and education, then we've lost it. See, again, two things. One, boundary conditions, that, in terms of what you are covering in this paper. Two, if you really look at the vision, you will see that aesthetics, health, sports, I haven't mentioned urban rooftop farming, for instance, simply for lack of space. I don't know if it's there even in the paper, maybe it is. So nobody is denying. The idea is that here we are talking about human settlements, and whatever, because of the limitations, because it's not one paper, we analytically break it up into looking at education, looking at health, looking at something. So I'm all for it. But okay, then your point and also your point about, I really do not understand. What I'm saying is that science, knowledge generation may be inadequate, in which case more needs to be done. I have no quarrel with that. What I'm saying is that even that which is done, when I'll link it to the point that you said about people moving to people moving to cities, and it's usually a way of keeping the poor out. I mean, that is a question of politics, that's what I mean. What we are able to achieve, what the forces of the country, what the people together are able to achieve in terms of getting their rights is a question of politics, that's what I mean. That's all that it means. So it has to be a struggle. But the only thing is, in fact, I fully agree. In fact, it's a quote from another study from another author, which is not a good way to this thing, because the political part is usually, the political struggle part or the political economy part is usually underemphasized. But I believe that even the struggle to create the right awareness, to find the right perspectives, to have the openness, which I often do not find, have the openness to look for solutions is missing. That is a big problem that I find. Everybody wants to, if you were to ask me, and this is particularly for the editors, the single biggest problem to creating an alternative future is to stick to one's own ideological premises. That I feel is the biggest problem. From this extreme to the other, I have a very open attitude, but you can have the extreme right, the extreme left and everything else in between, and that itself becomes the biggest problem to trying to come towards a consensus, which is why I've said there is a need. One can have a certain consensus and say other things are open to question and open to knowledge. We are open to, whatever knowledge, whatever data, whatever study comes on. For instance, I'd like to mention here the point that Dunu is making. I mean, I understand Dunu's passion from a very long time about labor, but see, the point is that if labor increases productivity, so does everything else, so does knowledge. So that, there is a study of the Club of Rome called Factor 4, fourth report of the Club of Rome, because we are talking about the future. So we should be aware of futuristic studies, and people have talked about it. Halving resource use, doubling rate of productivity. So they are talking about how the whole thing about ICT is about energy efficiency, is about that also. So labor, yes, if there is an exploitative situation, then let's get into the politics of it and fight it. Yes, but we should be able to define the problem properly. I have no quarrel with that. If that is really the case, in fact, I feel that people on the alternative this thing, everybody in this room, we are failing in our task, and not now. We have been failing for the past 30 years because the forces of capitalism, technology development, and everything are marching on, and we can keep sitting and जितने भी हम rhetoric या जितना भी passion से बोल रहे हैं कि ये नहीं हो रहा है, वो नहीं हो रहा है, but we have not been able to actually come up with the alternative perspectives. So to the extent that we can come up with alternative perspectives, like I think this first urbanization and sustainable local economy is a kind of a perspective of those lines.